Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's session. From lockdown to life-saving, how access planning protects students and staff. My name is Tiffany Trin, Senior Marketing Manager with the Knox Company, and we're grateful to be partnering with the I Love You Guys Foundation and Ingenuity for today's discussion. So in today's session, we'll explore how schools and first responders can strengthen coordination and access planning to improve safety and emergency response. You'll hear from subject matter experts who have worked closely with school districts and law enforcement to develop practical strategies that make a meaningful difference when every second counts. So before we get started, let's go over a few quick housekeeping notes. As far as audio, everyone will remain muted during the presentation. The chat is available to message presenters and panelists directly. We do encourage you to submit questions at any time using the Q&A panel. And then these questions may be answered live during the Q&A portion. If you want to enable live transcript, you can click on that show captions button, and then a recording will be provided at the end of the session so that you can share it among your team. And then with further ado, I'll turn this over to Neil Zipser from Knox to lead today's discussion.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to some of you out there. I'm Neil Zipser with the Knox Company and will be today's moderator. Knox is a woman-owned small business based in Phoenix, Arizona, and this year we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. Many of you are familiar with Knox from our secure lock boxes, which more than 15,000 fire departments use to gain rapid access. However, an increasing number of schools and law enforcement agencies have adopted Knox boxes to provide law enforcement with quick, safe, and secure access during emergencies. As a result of this need, Knox introduced the Knox Entry for Schools program a couple of years ago to accelerate law enforcement response when it's needed most. I'm honored to be joined today by Pat Hamilton, Stacy Avila, and Dr. Kevin Eberly. I'll let each of you introduce yourselves, starting with Pat.
Morning. I'm in Denver, so I'm going to say morning, everyone, because it's still morning here. But thanks for having us, Neil. And Pat Hamilton, Alliance Director for the I Love You Guys Foundation. Before joining the foundation, I spent 23 years in public education. The last decade of that was Chief Operating Officer for Adams 12 5-star schools, which is a district of about 52 schools, 35,000 students here in the north part of the Denver metro area. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And Pat, I'm also in Denver, so good morning to you. It's a nice day here.
Yeah.
I'm Stacy Avila. I'm the training coordinator for the I Love You Guys Foundation. And in my previous life, though, I was a police officer with the Arvada, Colorado Police Department. Was on that job for 21 years before I retired just about 9 years ago. And I have kind of been around the I Love You Guys Foundation since the beginning. One of my other assignments, I was a hostage negotiator for the Jefferson County Regional SWAT team and was the primary negotiator at the Platte Canyon High School shooting where we lost Emily Keys. She was a 16-year-old girl that was taken hostage during that event. Her folks, John Michael and Ellen Keys, started the I Love You Guys Foundation just days after her death and have been dedicated since with school safety and our safety program. So it's really an honor to be here, and I will kick it over to Kevin.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to say good afternoon because I'm calling in from Buffalo, New York, and with Stacy and Pat's background, I feel humbled to be in their presence because their background and what they've done in the last 25 years, I mean, it's amazing stuff. I really appreciate it. It's an honor being here with all of you. I'm a retired building administrator. I've been a principal for, a little bit over 25 years, mostly in the Buffalo area, 23 years in Buffalo itself. I actually aspired up to the Chief Operating Officer in charge of security and facilities within the district. And I was in the suburban districts for 10 years before that. Prior to education, I was actually a police officer in Hampton, Virginia, and a tactical officer responsible for a lot of emergency response way back. I'm the old timer on the screen here, so I go back into the 80s. And Stacy and I have similar backgrounds with hostage negotiation and a lot of the elements for emergency response and safety. My whole career literally has been dedicated to safety and keeping our students and teachers and citizens out on the street, safe. And my passion's still going many years after it. And I've got a little bit different background going from law enforcement to education. And now, as a consultant with that ingenuity, I have my own LLC for leadership and safety in the education and community worlds. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you to all three again for your time. We have a lot to get to, and when you get three people together very passionate about school safety and security, there could be a lot of talking, and this could probably go on for hours, but we only have an hour today, so we'll jump right into it. Specifically since, well, even before that, but what we've seen is schools have hardened themselves. And often law enforcement access during lockdowns has been taken for granted. So the question is, do we have confidence in law enforcement can enter the school classrooms when needed? Today we'll examine lessons learned from the Robb Elementary School shooting, the best ways to develop a response plan with your law enforcement partners, the importance of considering all access points, and much more. But specifically since the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland, Florida, schools are doing more to harden themselves and make it harder for the bad guys to get in. And this isn't a bad thing because we've learned that locked doors do save lives. However, this also creates additional challenges for law enforcement to gain access when needed. Stacy, can you discuss this a little more?
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. We have made a difference with how we approach safety in schools. And hardening the target has certainly been a consideration all across the country and a result of a lot of these incidents. And we want to take lessons learned from each one. And it's been pretty remarkable to see that we are moving the school safety needle. When we first started kind of tracking these mass killer events, 38% of the time they were happening in schools. And that's now down to below 6%, which means we are making a difference. We also know that locked doors save lives. In the 2015 Sandy Hook Commission report, #1 in environmental design recommendation were doors that could be locked from the inside by anyone, kind of our classroom doors, thinking like that. So we know that, yes, it's a lifesaver, but we also have to take into account then after an event is complete, how do we get in? Or during an event, right? How are we getting in? And certainly, I think Kevin will be able to agree with this. Law enforcement, we'll get in, right? But we want to take some other things into account. If we're having to breach every single door, there's the time constraint, there's the cost, and all of these kind of things that mold into this. So being able to quickly access our schools and get people the help they need is just paramount. And like I said, Kevin, you probably have some thoughts on this as well.
Well, and I think with the principal's hat on for all the years, especially in the inner city, I mean, I was always in what I call the what if scenario, the what if this does happen, or the inconsistencies of the locking mechanisms or the preventative measures that a lot of school districts put in. You're only as good as the weakest link. So to manage a school as a building principal, it was daunting in many ways, depending on the different personalities, different teachers, as we know from all the history. And Pat can attest to this. I mean, as far as even with you guys, with I Love You Guys, and I mean, what you did as a hostage negotiator in your own school, the good and the bad and the ugly of those scenarios is across the board. We can write books on top of books of what's right and wrong, but it really comes down to the weakest link. So I think a lot of the things from my end, trying to keep everybody safe within the building, and for an example, going into a lockdown, we break protocols for that lockdown right away when we have to open the door for security coming in or police coming in or emergency response if they're not going to breach the building itself and spend lots of money just crashing, which you're going to get in. We had to use crash bars and we had to use all kinds of stuff to get in, but there are different ways for safety of the officers, safety for the emergency response people coming in. I think it's something we really have to look at as far as the big picture of the why, and not even talking about the recovery afterwards. And Pat will allude to this as far as the recovery and looking at all the damage and all the different remnants, the remnants of all the things that happened from an incident. So it really is an overall element of looking at the weakest links. How do we actually make it systems thinking and where everybody has a shared vision for the same mission to keep everybody safe?
And Kevin, just what you said there about recovery, like with the foundation, we talk about recovery starts before the crisis begins.
Absolutely.
So how well we plan for it, prepare for it is directly proportional to how well we will recover from it.
We are making a case here to include law enforcement in your drills, which is what we did in my district. So in my district, when we would run our lockdown drills, the admin staff, they would lock down. So the deal was, we're going to come unlock you first. We're going to get you out of lockdown first so you can then go participate in the rest of the drill with the observation teams and the teams that we're going to be unlocking the doors. But this was a component of our drills, was to have law enforcement enter, which then would tell us, is key access available? Are they prepared to make that key access or get that key access? So again, having law enforcement involved with your drills is going to help you understand the importance of them having access, because if they can't get in, your drill is going to take way longer than it should. So involving law enforcement will expose some of your weak spots that you have in this whole scenario.
And if I could just add to this, what Stacey's saying, and she knows this as a tactical officer, probably one of the most gut-wrenching elements is entry, of actually knowing when to enter and how to enter and what's the most safest way. And that is time consuming when it really comes to, and you don't have time when it comes to an active shooter. The old days was slow, methodical, use mirrors, cut the pie, all the different things. Now it's like you go to the shooter and you got to look at the easy access in. So there are definitely elements here that we have to really discuss it deeper and keep this conversation going with what that access is, just for safety of the officers or fire coming in.
One of the things I do at Knox is I handle the government affairs work here, and I was talking with a legislator a couple weeks ago, and he goes, our state spent a lot of money on panic alarms as well as new mapping technologies. And we do that to get law enforcement there faster. And I kind of asked him, well, what confidence, how much confidence do you have, though, that law enforcement can actually get in even when they have that earlier notification? Do you guys think that this access has been overlooked both by legislators, school officials, and maybe even law enforcement? Kevin, what do you think about that?
I think it's absolutely overlooked. I think what Pat has done and what I Love You Guys Foundation, the different elements as far as looking at solutions to prevention and the different things. I think, again, it's what I call passive acceptance. I think a lot of people are in this country that still think it's not going to happen here. We're just a little suburban school outside of, wherever, out of Buffalo. I mean, I'll use Buffalo as an example. There's 790 school districts in the state of New York. In Western New York alone, there's 98 of them just in Western New York, from Lake Ontario all the way down to the Pennsylvania line. Very few really are going into a lot of things we're talking about as far as really progressive, preventative type measures, because they feel we're a great, suburban area. We don't have these things going on, and we see this all over the country. So I really do. I truly believe we're still in a passive acceptance world and not looking at it in a very, not aggressive, but assertive way to say, we really have to educate more and more and keep on talking about this and have platforms like this, or the different elements with Zero Now and all the different elements. If people want to get involved with different platforms for safety, absolutely start looking at it, because we have to really start looking at getting rid of the passive acceptance that it's not going to happen here.
I think another thing, Neil, when you're mentioning all the other tools we have, the kind of panic alarms and mapping and all really important tools, and getting us there more quickly is so important. But if we then have to slow down and stop to get in, then we've lost some of that benefit, right? And Knoxbox, I was kind of excited to when I knew I was going to do this webinar, because that was a tool as a street cop that we, benefited from for years and years. Now, we had, certain apartment buildings, things like that. Certainly we saw, our fire department's knock boxes outside of so many of our buildings. And when we were kind of looking into, hey, we would like to be able to have access for the law enforcement side too. And so a lot of times those Knox boxes were right next to each other. One had red reflective tape for fire and blue reflective tape for law enforcement. As it turns out, fire didn't want to share their keys, which is perfectly fair, because we would not have been as careful with them. But just that ability to be able to get in quickly and safely made all the difference in the world. And so when I was kind of thinking about in the school setting, it just makes sense. Why would we not want the same capacity there as well? And so I really like that.
Neil, you talked about investments, and I mean, to me, the word that comes to mind, and we often use this in the form of technology, but it's integration. So, but it's in this case, integration. Yes, there's an integration component for all of your technology parts, but it's integration of the whole sphere of school safety. So you've got to have a culture of school safety. You've got to have great preparation. You need to have protocols for common protocols. We happen to endorse the standard response protocol. We like that one the best. You've got to have your technology integrated. So the thing is, and then access is part of that. And access isn't always a key fob or a card access. A lot of times in many schools, including the schools that in District 12, we relied on brass keys at the classroom level. We afforded and made significant updates to all the exterior doors, but the interior doors, this was thousands of doors for us. And so the thought of having or the ability to go ahead and put technology on those doors where it was going to be something where it was automatic was really outside of the budget that we could afford. Even in a bond project, we weren't going to do that. We were going to have brass keys. So all of this stuff the plan has to integrate together, and it has to keep in mind the technology. What technology do you have? How can it help you? What are the things that are kind of analog, which is a brass key? Do you have common terminology? Have you practiced this stuff with the people that are going to be responding, as well as the people that own the first 5 minutes of any response, which is the classroom teacher and that custodian and those people in the school? They own the first 5 minutes. So it's all about the integration that falls under this big umbrella of preparation.
So Pat, let's keep talking about that preparation and developing this response strategy. Who should normally take the lead in that? Should it be the school or law enforcement? And who should be in that room when this plan is developed?
I love the question, and I would say whoever's willing to take the lead and raise their hand and say, this is important and we're going to do this in our community. We have seen this go both ways. I've seen schools lead the effort, and I've seen law enforcement and first responders, and I've seen county emergency managers come in and lead the effort. So for me, it's the person that raises their hand and say, I will be in charge of this. And then they get the group together. The group you've got to have school district people, you've got to have the law enforcement community, fire is an important part of that, EMS, emergency management, all of those people that are first responders and stakeholders. And again, I'll say the very initial first responder of any crisis in a school is the school staff. So that I consider them first responders as well. They own the first 5 minutes of any crisis in their building. So getting all of those people in the room together, we used to talk about that was the side effect of the standard response protocol when you would implement that. And now we just say it's the effect, because it really does. Getting that group together, then at that point, once you're together, you're going to stay together. So it's not just let's implement SRP and be done with it. It's also, now that we've done SRP, maybe we should be talking about reunification, and then maybe we should be meeting monthly or quarterly to talk about what are the things that are happening in our schools, in our community. The things that happen in your community on a Saturday evening, by the way, land on your doorstep Monday morning at your school. So it's it really does, to use a pun, or not a pun, but a term that's commonly used. It takes a village to do this. That village in this case are all those people in your community that are stakeholders. So that's who needs to be at the table. Whoever raises their hand to be that person that wants to lead it, man, good for you. And whoever does that, start with buying someone a cup of coffee. That will get you a long way. Go get a cup of coffee and talk about, this is what I want to do. People will buy in. This is important stuff.
I would say to kind of piggyback on Pat too, your school staff are really the immediate responders. They are there. And if the school is leading something in its silo and law enforcement is thinking of something in that different silo, fire's thinking of something different for that response, all of those best laid plans will fall apart day of if there has not been discussion ahead of time about what we're going to do. And I think Kevin would probably agree with this. If it looks like there's not a plan, the cops will come in and take it over. And it doesn't always go smoothly, right? We're problem solvers, right? A lot of our first responders fire as well. We will get things done. But how much better would it be if we had discussed ahead of time who was going to fulfill what role and who's responsible, kind of for what areas. And so there's an agreement that way. And then also we already know each other then. Outside of a crisis, we always kind of say, exchanging business cards, it's too late if we're doing that in the midst of a crisis. We've already missed the opportunity. And if we can plan for, prepare for, have the discussions about all of the variables that we can think of and have a plan for it, those won't be setting you back day of, because we'll already know what to do. And our focus can really be on those things that are going to be popping up, because that's every event that you have the unexpected things. So what we don't have an excuse for is if we have not addressed the things that we should have known about and had a plan for that.
And if I can coattail off of you with Pat, overarching, encompassing systems thinking piece of community really does come down to leadership. And as Pat was alluding to, is like who's passionate about that. There could be a caveat to that, though, in a negative way, if you have the wrong people going in to that lead position for the wrong ideas, and it's more of a power over type thing versus an actual power with and an actual collaborative type piece. So I've always led with attributes and impediments. What are the attributes that we bring everybody together? And that's the one thing. I'm in a city right now, Buffalo. You can go back 150 years. It was called Silo City. It was the city of good neighbors, but it was Silo City because of all the grain mills and the grain elevators. We're in a world of silo cities. I mean, there's a lot of emergency response across the country that haven't collaborated like Stacy and their department, and where you can see that it's a separate entity. We'll respond, we'll take care of it. Once we're there, we're in charge. Not really looking at the social emotional elements, all the different things that are going on within the first responders, which are in the actual school itself. But again, there has to be personal mastery, involved. There has to be who are the ones that are really they have the background. And as a principal, I can tell you through the years, you knew right off the bat who you were going to use in your emergency response internal team to actually develop a response, because some would just step up, as Pat's alluding to. You'd step up and say, yeah, I want to be involved with this. We know it. And that's where you build off of. And then when you build that with the collaborative team, bring those silos together. Now you have a collective community of emergency, community, administration, teachers. And let's not forget the one that no one really thinks about is the students, because the students themselves have a lot of great voices and a lot of great ideas in these emergency preparedness situations when you're actually preparing and actually doing a whole element of response and procedures for emergencies.
And I'm sure the parents have a loud voice in that discussion too.
Well, that actually is included in it with the parent meeting. You're absolutely right. The parents piece too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Stacy,
what we
you
want,
mentioned,
Neil, what we want is a coalition of the committed, not the willing.
Yeah,
great point.
great comment. Right, committed.
Stacy, you had mentioned something about how you had a law enforcement box next to a fire department box, and the fire department puts a box next to the front door of school because really what their needs are is if an alarm goes off in the middle of the night, they want something convenient right next to the front door. From a tactical point of view, that may not be the smartest move, let's say, to have a law enforcement officer running up with adrenaline and gloves and fumbling with a key at a box. They kind of want that in their hands early. So that collaboration and that early discussion will help decide on things like placement. Do you want to talk a little bit more
Absolutely,
about that?
because this is why, again, that collaboration is so important. If the school just is saying, okay, we'll handle this. Yeah, we got the Knox box, put it right up by where the fire department's box is. It's likely to not be used by law enforcement because we have a whole other consideration of tactical approach. Certainly the front door is usually not going to be the way that we're going to go in. It's just dependent on the situation. So kind of thinking, I had a school district I was training, and I thought this was brilliant. I like to steal little ideas all over the country and then kind of spread the seeds around to other places. But what they did with their Knox box was had it attached to the school zone sign well away from the school, but near enough that it was handy. And they did that the entire district. So it was a consistent place, which is why I think it works well for fire being at the front door, right? It's consistent. So a consistent place, but allowed law enforcement to obtain keys without putting themselves into kind of a higher risk as a tactical approach. And so this, again, everything's going to go back to let's talk and plan together ahead of time. And I'm sure, Kevin, I'm sure you've got something to throw in there as well.
Oh, there's no question about it. I think I love that idea of the key off the camp by the safety zone. That's a good one. But again, as I was saying before, the approach, totally two different things. Fire response, let's go to the smoke. Tactically responding and an entry team coming in, setting up your snipers across the street, and all the different things are going on. It's a whole different tactical mindset with that. But again, from the inside, being the principal, I've been saying this for a long time. Plans are breached every time. when someone has to come open the door, because a lot of people don't go and follow. They might be in a lockdown, but who comes to the door? There've been a lot of, administrators or teachers who just take the lead and go open the door, and they break protocol as far as actually being locked down somewhere. So that's the other thing, that people put themselves in harm's way in a lot of different ways, understanding if there's a real active shooter. There's people really put themselves in harm's way to get there, because that's what they have to do. The quickest way to get someone in without busting down the doors, go to the door. Very difficult.
Yeah, shout out to the 27J school district, which is outside of Denver there. They put their boxes next to the front marquee of the school, which I thought was a great idea. We
Yeah.
work with another school district that puts a box at the gym entrance of the school, which is usually the back or side of the school, with no windows there. So you definitely don't want to be in the line of sight of the shooter. Another thing is that we learned from Uvalde is that, getting into the school is one thing, but then getting into that classroom is another. So that consideration of all possible lockdown entry points is critical to be part of this. So there could be gates going around the whole school grounds. You got external keys, and I'm guessing inside schools there's different internal master keys for things like the science lab and cafeteria and classroom. So how important is that, Pat, or whoever wants to take this question?
I mean, I think I'll come back to drills real quick because this was a lesson learned for us. We had some protocols within our facilities that certain things would happen. We weren't using roll down gates anymore. That was a violation of fire code, but we had fire doors that would release that would maybe allow access outside of the facility. So like once a fire door is released magnetically, there's crash bars going one direction out, egress, it's going to go out. But getting in deeper into that facility then becomes a challenge. So when you run your drills, these are things that come up in your after action report. So you're going to run a drill, you're going to have your law enforcement there, they're going to go and release every classroom. They're going to take notes about what keys are working well, maybe you've got locks that are sticking or not sticking or something like that. But they're also going to note like, hey, we couldn't get into this area of the building because we didn't have the right key. B, we weren't expecting those doors to those mag locks to release and those doors to be closed. So every time we did one of these drills, there was always something to take away from that. And there was homework for the school district. It was work orders. It was maybe gaps in trainings that we identified. And again, we've been doing 2 lockdown drills a year since 2008, maybe 2007 in my district, with law enforcement there. Every single one, all 52 buildings, twice a year, usually law enforcement teams of anywhere from 10 to 15 officers. Some SROs, some of those were street patrol officers. We always wanted lots of people in the buildings, but we always learned something new from those. And it could be, at the end, there are minor little tweaks, but a minor little tweak could save you 30 seconds, could save you a minute. And we know our research and Department of Justice research tells us that, it's 70% of these things are over in 5 minutes and 90% are over in 10 minutes. And so seconds count. And so if you can do things, you learn things through your preparation and drills, and then go in and correct those things. So just knowing how officers are going to make their way into your building and how they're going to move through your facility, and then eliminate the barriers that you may have inadvertently put in place because you thought you were making the space safer. Those are all lessons that you're going to learn by doing your drills and having law enforcement there. So I can't stress that enough. Really having those teams there to participate in those drills is a big thing.
And that's night and day across the country, because they've actually eliminated the live drills with police in New York. That was a governor's decision. They didn't really want the stress and strain. They went on the social emotional thing, and it was more stressful having that. And I was an advocate to it, to actually have the training mutual, which is difficult. So across the country, nationally, we really still are in a dilemma in a lot of these trainings. I agree with you totally, Pat. I think it's critical.
Yeah, we talk a lot about this, and Stacey will chime in here. We talk about a lot this in our training a lot, because drills we don't have to introduce any trauma or drama to learn muscle memory and muscle habit. We're just going to, and we're going to tell people, we're also going to announce that this is going to happen. We're going to plan this with our law enforcement community. We're going to tell our parents ahead of time, by the way, when you're doing that, go ahead and give your parents some talking points. So when their student comes home at the end of the day, say, how was school today? And they said, we had a lockdown drill. Your parents are already aware of that. And you've given them talking points to continue that conversation that evening, because these aren't just school lessons. These are life lessons that we're teaching kids now. So, but yeah, we do talk about no trauma, no drama in these drills. They're just as effective in a lot of cases more effective when you don't scare people. Stacy, do you want to chime?
Absolutely. Yeah, because so our guidance is we are not putting in any simulated acts of violence or anything like that in our schools, just a hard stop. But if we look at our partners in fire, how long have we been training fire safety in our schools? And when does it start? It starts right at the very beginning, pre-K.
Yep.
And how have we trained it? And we talk, we're talking about it. We talk about, kids where they know, oh, if my shirt were to catch on fire, what do I do? Stop, drop, and roll. Is it necessary to actually light a trash can on fire or actually to teach fire safety? No. So the same way, we don't have to simulate acts of violence to train lockdown. But having our officers part of the drills, not by simulating acts of violence, but being part of the response, being there, seeing what that is, I think it's a very powerful thing from the law enforcement perspective. I know I'd go and help with drills. Just that feeling of in the middle of a day to have a school be completely silent and dark. You need to see what that feels like and experience that as a responding officer. And I liked what Pat said too. Yes, you involved school resource officers. Yes, you involved, but also additional officers that were patrol and inviting them to participate, because if we don't think everybody's not coming, everyone's coming. And so having an opportunity for your other officers to see the inside of the school and experience that is just going to benefit you day of. Absolutely.
If you're worried about them, if you're a school district and you're worried about my law enforcement partners don't have time to do this, or they're not going to show up for the drill, I will tell you that they are very interested in participating in your drills. And if you're really worried about it, order some pizzas. In Colorado, we
I've seen this is the second time you've offered, if you bring food and drink, the cops will come. And you're not wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, educated. If you feed them, they will come. In Colorado, breakfast burritos are a thing. It's like that is a thing here. So we would provide breakfast burritos, but pizza's go a long way too.
Yeah, like our schools in Arvada would offer up over the summertime or over breaks to allow us to come in and use them for building searches. And so, everyone's benefiting, because then we're getting an opportunity to do building search training in an environment that we might not have before. We're also seeing the layout of the school. We're seeing, right? And so everyone is this kind of beneficial symbiotic relationship there. And it just helps with relationships that need to be there anyway.
We had a program in my district where any officer could stop into any of our schools and eat lunch for free. Now, people are like, oh, school lunches. Well, our pizzas were pretty good. And so pizza day was pretty successful. Occasionally we would get drop-ins on pizza day. Maybe it was corn dog day, maybe not so much, but pizza always got.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Those are those kinds of little programs. It's good for also the heart and soul of our first responders, inviting in, come read to the kindergartner or come eat lunch with the kids. And again, so you get those good things. You also get this opportunity for law enforcement or for fire, our first responders, to be in the school, not because something bad has happened, but just because we're part of the community. And I know another Arvada story that we would go and we had school resource officers assigned to all of our middle school and high schools, but for our elementary schools, there was a floating officer. So they asked as district officers that we would go do that if you work day shift, and come at a different time, sometimes pickup time, sometimes drop off, sometimes just in the middle of the day. And, the first time I'd go to this one elementary school, what's going on? What's wrong? What's wrong? And then like your third time there, oh, Stacy, come on in. And, and then the kids are used to seeing you. And again, it's just, you've talked a little bit, Kevin kind of alluded to that kind of the, emotional responsibility that we have as law enforcement. And all of that just bolsters a good relationship with our communities.
You want to build your culture, build it through the fabric of the school. And you talk about community between law enforcement and fire, that the first 3 seconds you walk into a school, the fabric of that school and the culture, you can tell. You can tell by the interaction of students and teachers and administration, and that's all part of this whole collaborative community. I mean, it's critical.
I loved walking through our elementary schools with police officers because they're looked at as superheroes, and so I was just affiliated with the superhero because I knew the superhero, but it was always a super fun time to go walk through. elementary school with the uniformed
So
officer.
you were like Robin instead of Batman.
Yeah. Who was Superman's sidekick? Jimmy. I was
Oh,
Jimmy.
Jimmy Olsen.
Jimmy Olsen. Yes.
Okay, you guys are starting to date yourself now. Look. You know, and talking about dating, I ran into a school administrator with some old-fashioned thinking, and I asked them what their law enforcement response strategy was, and they said we have it handled. I gave my sheriff a key to the school. But one thing we learned from pretty much every active shooting incident is you never know who the first person or agency is going to be on the scene. Um, Giving a key to the sheriff or even an access card to the police chief, that's really not the best practice, is it? And Kevin, I don't know if you want to start with this one.
I definitely disagree with that because again, you don't know who is going to be there. Going back to the what if scenarios, to go and just give it a nice gesture to give it there. I mean, I don't agree. Stacy, you can jump in on this
Well,
as far
I was
as
going to say,
response.
we actually do know that the first person there is not going to be the chief or the sheriff.
Right,
I think we can agree to that, right? That
Right.
that is
Right.
most likely, unless it is a very small kind of two-man department kind of
Mhm.
thing. It's likely not going to be that. And this is great that we brought this up because it addresses one of the questions that had shown up where, or maybe more of a little comment that Brent had put in, where he was able to get all of law enforcement in the area, both key cards and master keys to the school. And that's where it's one of those things where time matters. And so what we did, certainly we can't carry a key in a larger area to every single school, but having the key to the Knox box that gets you into any school
Right.
and making sure that every single officer has one, anyone that is
Mhm.
on the street has that key is paramount.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's that's building a trusting community. I mean, that's the other part of it. I mean, the whole element of lost keys and this and that and what procedural type things. They have to build it through education and again go back to leadership. Who are the leaders in every one of these agencies? What are you drilling down to the importance of this as far as the safety of the whole community? I think it's so critical.
I like seeing Brent's comment as well because what it introduces into the conversation is scalability.
Mhm.
So if you're in a community, and I grew up in a small town in Northwest Oklahoma, there was like 3 elementary schools, 1 high school, 1 middle school. So that is exactly what Brent was doing. That is a tactic that you could have applied in that setting. Now, in the district I was in Denver, with that many 52 facilities, they didn't all run off the same master key system for the exterior. So it would have been a burden. But I do love that he brought that into the conversation because what's easier to scale? And Stacy mentioned this, a single key that gets you into a box that has all of the keys. That's a very scalable thing if you're a large district. If you're a small district, it's scalable because it's not very expensive to do it. So keep that in mind as well. But in the meantime, while you're looking at solutions, what you said, Neil, is like, don't give the key to one single officer, the chief or the sheriff, and think that they're going to be the first ones there. Because like Stacey said, they're not. It's that officer they might be second or third there, but it's that officer that's on patrol that's going to be there first.
Or even kind of jumping ahead a little bit, if you think that if you have a school resource officer and that they're the only one that needs the key or access, then you've kind of put yourself behind the 8 ball there as well. Because in one of these situations, and especially Kevin, you hit this earlier, our tactical response or response to these active shooters or active killer events are very different. Pre-1999, pre-Columbine, it was slow it down, wait for SWAT. And we are now have become so aggressive in our response that it's single officer response. So if we have an event in the school, your SRO is the single officer response. They're going to be dealing with the situation. We don't want to rely on them to then stop the response to go and open the door. So it needs to be that being mindful that it needs to be access available to everybody, law enforcement wise, first responder wise.
And
There's a question on the chat right now asking how many keys you think should be in the box. And Neil, I jumped ahead of you. You're probably going to ask that, weren't you? How many keys do you think should be in a box? That's a good question, actually, as far as what you actually need for the entry team is just to get in.
And Kevin, I'll give you a good answer. Your environment dictates your tactics. So depending upon what your environment is, how many officers you might have for teams like that, and again, having those conversations kind of ahead of time, what our response teams might look like for the schools, about how many will we have, then that will help drive your actual numbers. Because I hate to say an actual number, because
Mhm.
Pat's school that he grew up in rural Oklahoma, or where I grew up in rural Montana, is going to be very different than what you have in Buffalo,
Right.
right? Or some of our
Right.
suburban, urban schools. So again, your environment dictates your tactics. Talk about it ahead of time and get that reasonable number.
Which is a big thing too, a caveat to this actual question, which is a great stimulus of a question, of actually looking at facilities and what your building is actually structured as access within the building itself. When you look at the different entries where, I mean, Rob was a perfect example of it as far as them waiting, depending on what keys. Buffalo, the old archaic way, they had best keys and everybody had the keys. They had master keys. They had all the different things. So if you had that system, you had a master key, then you only need the one key, and to get in, you have access to every door. Most buildings aren't that way anymore. So it's very archaic in that way. So it could be difficult. It's a difficult question when you're looking at actually individual door entry. So that goes into now futuristic, getting into more modern lockdown and access controls within your building itself.
Yeah, and I'll add to Stacy's answer. It really depends how many keys and fobs you want to give out, because there are different size lock boxes. The fire departments typically use our smaller lock box because all they're looking for is that one key to get into that one door on the outside. Law enforcement may want those external keys, the internal keys, the access
Mhm.
cards. They may want a map folded up in there. We've had one school district ask us if it's big enough to put tourniquets or Narcan in there. So again, coming up with that content list may dictate the size of the box you want. Another thing is I want to get back to one more thing that Kevin brought up early, which was the damage that can be done by breaching, or maybe it was Stacy, but at UNLV, and I know it's a university, not a K through 12, but a couple years ago they had a shooter, and obviously when this happens, you have to check out every room to make sure it's clear, and they wound up breaking 500 doors and damaging them. Obviously, that costs the school district a lot of money, but also when it comes back to getting the students and staff back to the school as fast as possible and as normal as possible, you don't want them to go through that trauma again by seeing broken doors. Is that right, Pat?
Yeah, it's we've been having a lot of conversations, and Stacy was actually on a podcast that talked about this, about responsible entry into the classroom. So we don't want to re-traumatize students that have already been through a traumatic situation. And so the difference in someone hitting a door with a battering ram versus being able to unlock that door and then make entry and explain what's going on.
Mhm.
Think about that position. Think about that position if you are, an 11-year-old student sitting on the corner in that safe wall, and then you hear that door just getting bashed. And granted, now our law enforcement partners are going to say, this is who we are, we're coming in, but we tell people, do not open that door for anyone. Once you're behind that locked door, we need you to stay behind that locked door. So having the key to make that entry is going to save you a lot of emotional stress on your students and staff, as well as save you a lot of money in getting that facility back open and ready to return to learning. So I'll defer to Stacy on this one, because I think she was in a situation where
I
there
have
was
a
a good.
feeding that I've broken doors before, and you're not wrong, but you're
You
not
can see it there. You can see it there.
but no, absolutely. If as we're talking about emotional responsibility with clearing a lockdown, so after threat has been neutralized, we are just in the evacuation process. If we don't have to damage doors, why would we, right? We don't need to breach every single door if that is our situation. Taking that pause, getting the keys, having that plan in place again about how that's going to look, saves a lot of that, and it does matter for that recovery process, absolutely. And that is our responsibility as first responders as well. So and all this to say, it doesn't mean that we'll never have to breach a door, because certainly that can be the situation. Certainly we might have to do that, but if this prevents us having to breach every door,
Right.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Speed, and also speed of response too. We talked about how seconds count.
Mhm.
That is going to definitely have an impact, a positive impact on the speed of response.
Mhm. Yeah,
No,
no, if
especially
we
with,
have a situation, right?
right.
If we're having to pause to breach every single classroom door in a high school, that now you've turned a, event into, an 11, 12-hour event. I'm thinking about how long that was Jefferson County Regional SWAT team, in a Columbine. That's turned that into a much longer situation. Of course, there's other variables, but if you're able to just get in, key, evacuate out, that time matters.
Well, and architecturally, I mean, school districts are fortifying for hardness, yeah, hardening the areas so it's tough to get in. So even for a battering ram or anything for a tactical team to try to enter, could be a lot of damage coming in there instead of an easy access like Genetec systems or anything like that, or as you say, card access. I mean, it certainly you have 2, 3 thresholds to get into schools in a lot of places now, so it's a daunting task for an emergency team to come in, no question about it.
Yeah, and I recently read there's been an overall decrease in school shootings in 2025, but it's still more than 200 this year, which is tragic. But what we've really seen increase this year are the number of swatting or hoaxes that
Hmm.
have been coming in. And sometimes they're obvious, sometimes they're not so obvious. So when you could get away from breaching on a hoax, it's really the best practice, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's I mean I think we're seeing a lot of best practice come now from law enforcement partners and our 911 PSAP centers as well. They're starting to recognize they have things now, and I won't talk about those tells, but they have tells that they're looking for, and that will help them determine whether or not this is a hoax or not. Because they're oftentimes the one who gets the initial call. So the school doesn't even know this is happening because they didn't initiate the call. So I love to see that our law enforcement partners and community and 911 centers, PSAP centers are talking about this, and they have their things that they're looking for that would indicate if this is a tell to hopefully avoid putting that school into lockdown altogether. Or if they do go into lockdown, let's adjust the response the right way so we're not knocking doors down and doing things like that in a situation that was a hoax. I will say, in my career, there was probably 3 times in 2 decades that schools were put into lockdown um, inadvertently, accidentally, whatever that was, or maybe the wrong protocol was called. No one ever got in trouble for that. No one ever got in trouble for that. If whether it was we had an office administrator one time who did it, had a 911 center, a 911 center operator one time who put us into lockdown. No one ever got in trouble, and we actually looked at that as an opportunity. We quickly were able to get on an intercom and say, okay, this is not a lockdown. However, you are still in lockdown until someone comes to your door and releases this with the key. And we are going to do that just like we do in our drills. And it gave us a great opportunity to practice lockdown release in a situation that was more stressful than a drill, but less stressful than an active event. But the key thing there is someone made a decision to try to save lives based on the information they had in that moment. You do not get in trouble for that,
No.
ever. Yeah.
We do have a question about I think something you said earlier, Stacy, which was about putting a Knox box not by the front door, somewhere else, like a signpost. How would law enforcement know where it is if it's not on the actual school building? I assume we go back to Pat's answer about the drills and the pre-planning.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we've talked about it. And if we're thinking about district wide and it's in a consistent place, and I used the example of the signpost just because I thought it was a kind of a little ingenious for that particular school district, but it can be wherever. Just talk about it and come up with where can it be consistently placed in our environment that would be a good fit.
We had conversations with our law enforcement partners about where they wanted them. And this was interesting because we have 5 different agencies that supported my school district. And so that was part of our monthly meetings was to talk, everyone's in the room, we're going to talk about it. We're all going to agree on the spot. And then we're going to put it in the same spot at every school. So it wasn't different per school. We had a specific location that where they were mounted.
You were able to get cops to agree on tactics over 5 agencies.
That's big.
I didn't say
That's
how long
big,
it
yeah.
took, but it was a lot of breakfast burritos, I'll tell you that. But no, we were able to agree on a location that was going to be standardized across all the schools in the district. But the biggest thing is we didn't tell them, we let them tell us
Yeah.
because we're not the response team in that situation. They are, so they know where they're going to need those keys.
Mhm. And the other thing is it then starts bolstering that relationship to where there's this trust of no one has to run every single part. That collaboration of then, as first responders, then we can look for the schools that are obviously things that fall under your purview. And it could be that back and forth relationship, which is a good one to
That's
have.
ownership is huge in this. With teachers know that they're part of a solution of something of this magnitude, and they're included, and it's not just a top down. Hey, this is what we're going to do. Look at, as you're saying, we did fire drills for. I mean, oh my God, we had air raid drills back in the '60s. I mean, it was like that desk is going to protect me from a nuclear bomb. I always used to love that. It's like, man, this is really crazy stuff. But again, it comes down to that again, we keep on repeating it, but it's about community, but ownership is critical. I think that empowers a lot of people, and that you really start looking at your future leaders from that too, for being empowered into this whole process. Pat, you guys, Pat and Steve, you see this with I Love You Guys. I mean, just your whole protocol and what you're doing. Hey, I can see with the videos. I mean, that in itself is amazing when you look at it, how the ownership is with the look in the teacher's eyes, knowing that they're part of this whole entire process. It's really a remarkable procedure, and that's what we need to do with it across the board.
Yeah,
Thank you
Neil.
for that, Kevin. And would you think too that any of these crisis events or any really event that we have, the first breakdown, communication?
Yep.
And again, so we have to communicate ahead of time. And I'm kind of seeing some of the questions and comments where all of these things can really be addressed by communication. Dispatch needs to know where the boxes are. The school needs to know where the boxes are. Law enforcement, fire, right? And we have to communicate these things ahead of time and continue to communicate them during the event. So there shouldn't be any secrets with any of this.
That's where the trusting relationships come in. Trust is critical.
Yeah, the consistency also, Stacy, so critical too. You could be a brand new police officer, never done a drill at that school before, but to go to the signpost or the gym entrance, and that's where your access will be. So that consistency really is
Absolutely.
critical. We got about 5 or so more minutes.
And Neil was afraid we wouldn't fill the time. And I was like, no.
I wasn't
afraid. I said,
I was afraid this would go 3 hours.
I can do an 8-hour webinar. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to make sure I got in before we run out of time, so I may jump ahead here a little bit, Pat, is how can schools and even law enforcement get involved with the I Love You Guys Foundation?
Oh man, well, thank you for that one. That's a softball. iloveyouguys.org. That's all you have to do. So go to iloveyouguys.org, poke around the website. If you see something you like, you take it, you download it. It's frictionless. That we don't ask you for an email. We have no subscription. There's nothing like that. You literally just click the download button and it just goes to your computer. I will say a couple of things that I like to point out to people is classroom posters now available in 20 different languages. Parent handouts also available in 20 different languages. If you implement this program, it's not a secret. Let's tell our community that we're doing this. Let's be proud of the fact that we are taking safety seriously in our schools and that we're implementing a program. But yeah, it's all available at no cost, Neil, at iloveyouguys.org. Just like it's spelled on the screen here, you can see it on Stacy's saver as well. But yeah, and by the way, interesting fact, we average about 7,700 downloads a week of our materials. Those are individual downloads. We scrub out all the bots. We look for, someone who downloaded 30 things in 10 seconds from China. We scrub that data out. We know that's a bot. So these are real people. 1,500 individual users is about what we average a week, downloading 7,700 items off of our website.
And if you have an opportunity to attend a training, please do so in person. And what is so really fantastic about it is all the things we've been talking about. It's everybody in the room. So we have school staff, district staff, law enforcement, fire. If I'm your instructor, know there will be a plethora of firefighter jokes that you will, I'm sure, will appreciate. Right? Emergency management, mental health professionals, everyone from the community. So we really practice what we preach, is that everybody needs to be a part of that. And so whether we're thinking about rescue task force, law enforcement and fire, and kind of, the importance of that around the country, and then also adding that third piece of school in with all of our first responders. And it's been pretty amazing. Something that was really just a tragedy, and to have something so positive come from that. And the first training that John Michael gave was to about a dozen folks in a firehouse in Bailey, Colorado. And our programs are now in over about 65,000 different schools, districts, agencies around the country. So it's been very heartening to see.
It
You know,
definitely
I
is
had
a
a
table to Emily for sure. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, my goodness, what a legacy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a question sent to me, which was, it sounds like a teacher, but they brought up the idea of a key box to their school leadership, and the school leadership kind of pushed back, and they want to know if there was any advice that we could provide that could make something like a key box and law enforcement access a higher priority. And I'm not saying cameras aren't important and things like that, but a lot of times the whiz bang technology and the AI stuff, it gets people's attention. And something so practical, cost effective as a lockbox is something that, maybe it's too practical that it's not seen as important. So what advice do you have for teachers or anybody that wants to get in front of school administrators and say this should be a top priority? And I know, Kevin, I'm going to start with you because you've asked
I'm
me what the
really
price of a life is.
it's tough for me because I had when I hear all the great stories across the country, I had some really difficult times in Buffalo with some dysfunction depending on the lack of leadership. And when it comes to, I mean, we had 9 superintendents in 11 years. I mean, it was like it was crazy times for the consistency of leadership. So I'd be with them. I'm thinking whatever we can do to make it a safer and a better place for everybody. We suggest any kind of ideas. And again, I think if that came from a teacher, I think it's a good point where people are thinking, what are some other things that I can do to add to the solution here? And a lot of times it's really, well, just bunker down and lock your door. Well, I mean, okay, but there's a lot of planning. There's a lot of meetings, as you're saying, the podcasts, the webinars, all the things. As you say, Stacy, I love it when you say, hey, come on in and join in the training. People, I think, should be part of the training of this and actually see what's going on. Even if they don't have, I love you guys specifically in their district, boy, your offerings all over the world is incredible. And I think I think that's what it is. It's an open dialogue. Open this up to the world. I mean, that's what you're doing. And making it, again, going back to empowerment, I think it's a critical component for ownership to empower the people that are in the buildings that we've been calling the first responders all along.
Neil, ask any parent what they expect from the school day. They're going to say,
Mhm.
I expect you to keep my kids safe,
Yep.
and I expect you to deliver a high quality education. And they're going to say it in that order, and they mean it.
Mhm.
We need to start thinking about how we invest in our schools as well. I know
Mhm.
curriculum is 23 years in public education. Curriculum is expensive, technology expensive, but we have to start thinking about safety first because our parents think about safety first when we ask about what their expectations are of us. So to that teacher who wants to advocate for that Knox box, for that key, or for an entry plan, or for putting the SRP into place, the standard reunification method as well, maybe ask a couple of your parents to stand up in front of that board meeting with you, see where that goes.
Right?
That's a huge platform. Parent participation. Let me tell you, parent meetings, that, let's face it, that's the working force right there to actually influence different decisions in schools, for sure. I agree, Pat.
Okay, we only have about a minute left. Is there any last comments that the three of you want to make? That was a great finishing one, Pat. I should have just ended it on that, but I'm gonna
I
put
think that was a
pressure
good
on
finish.
Stacy
Yeah.
You're
and
like, I want Stacy to blow this up.
I want to drop the mic moment.
Neil,
Well,
thank you.
thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
I want to thank our panelists today for their expert insights and to all the attendees joining us. You can see the contact information for the four of us on this slide. For more information, again, on the I Love You Guys Foundation, visit iloveyouguys.org. For more information on Knox Entry for Schools, visit schoolentry.com. I want to remind everyone that today's session has been recorded and we will be sending you a link soon. Thank you all again, and everybody out there, be safe.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.